Hi, Julia. Thanks so much for taking time today to, really help us quell some of those anxieties and worries that our children are experiencing. When I had reached out to you, it really came from a place of just personal experience. So for those watching this little webinar, I wanted to kind of introduce Julia to you, our families, our members, because I think it's really a great way to showcase just how incredible Julia is and the work that she does with our families. We met Julia back in 2017 when we first launched Toronto Beyond the Blue. And she helped us actually during this same week talk about mental health and children. So I just want to kind of pass the mic over to Julia and let her really just introduce herself, her experience, and we'll get to some of the questions that our viewers had submitted. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for having me back. It's really good to connect again. Welcome to the land of new technology and learning for everybody, including myself. All of these online platforms, I don't know, it's a lot more stress on top of everything else, but we do what we can. Like Crystal said, I am a practicing registered psychotherapist. I work full-time for a school board in the eastern part of Durham region, the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board, as a mental health clinician. And I do have a private practice on the side where I can meet with families, I can meet with individual children, and I also do work with adults and quite a few of the population of police officers from different services.
And I'm so happy that we have you. Like it has been absolutely just a blessing to have met you so quickly. I know when we first met, you were very open when I was really talking about the struggles that we were having with our oldest son. And some of the insights that you gave me really helped me navigate that system where we were, I knew something was going on, but I wasn't sure what it was. And he has attention deficit disorder. So that was diagnosed. And, because of your insights, it really just empowered me to be able to do what's best for him in a very loving and calm and patient way. And really seeing through some of those behavioral issues that were presenting themselves as, not as acting out, but as kind of an unmet need that he needed to have met. So that's amazing. And this is why, you are one of our trusted and vetted resources. So, jumping right into it, one of the questions that was asked was by our families. So police kids are a little unique, right? Because our kids really understand that, mom or dad leaves and they go and they catch bad guys. And there's that assumed level of worry that we already have. But since COVID-19, I've noticed some changes in my kids. And the worry and the sadness has kind of been a little more prolonged. And I was really, this question really resonated with me because the question is, when is worrying something more than just worrying? And how do we know?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that it's important to know that there's a difference between worry and anxiety and those feelings versus having an anxiety disorder or something that's more clinical. So I use the word anxiety, just sort of an all-encompassing term for nerves or worry and that sort of thing, because we all get anxiety. And in fact, it's a normal stress response that's supposed to be there to help us. And it's to help us perceive or help us to respond when there's a perceived threat. So it's normal for people going through unprecedented times and unpredictable times to feel a sense of worry or anxiety. Typically, if we were not in this kind of prolonged pandemic situation, I would say that as long as it's not impacting their normal ability to function, it's pretty common and normal. Once you get sort of past the few weeks mark of incessant worrying that's impacting their kind of daily functioning and ability to sort of self-regulate with some coaching, that might be something worth kind of seeking extra support for.
Yeah, and honestly, thank you so much for that, because it really helps us as parents know when we need to start calling in our team, right? Start building up our mental health toolbox, so to speak, with the right professionals. Now, another question that came in from our private family group. So these are actual Toronto Beyond the Blue family members. Now, they're really they've actually had experiences where their member did get COVID. So they tested positive for COVID. And, with all of the media and everything kind of out there where, the news is reporting on people dying and things like that, their kids, they saw a heightened level of anxiety surrounding that positive diagnosis of COVID. So how do we as parents kind of navigate that? Because the risk is there. We know that it exists, and it is a possibility, like it's a very real possibility that our police service member or frontline worker could contract COVID.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to know that possibility is not the same thing as probability. It's a very realistic situation that they could contract COVID. However, like you said, the media is something that we always kind of caution against because of the way that it kind of over reports on tragedy and negative circumstances. It's pretty daunting to look at the numbers of deaths and COVID contractions that are being reported, but what they're not kind of showing is the perspective on, between 94 to 90% of people are showing resilience through this illness if they actually do contract it, as long as they're of a healthy stature and of an age that's, somewhat below 65 or 70. So I think putting things into perspective is always kind of helpful. The other thing is, we can't control everything, so it is important to be realistic about the possibility that you could get sick. But at the same time, there are things that we can control. So there are safety measures that we do take individually, either at home or at work, especially people who have cared loved ones who are on the front lines. Teaching our kids about what they're doing while they're away from home to help ensure that they are safe and that they're not bringing it home can be really reassuring. And then things that we can do at home with our kids, like teaching them the hygiene, sneezing into the sleeve, washing our hands, that sort of thing, covering our mouths and social distancing regularly.
So, and that leads me to another question that came in from our families. So one of the question was, when these restrictions start lifting and life can kind of return to our new normal, how do we transition our children from a state of emergency, not going outside, not seeing their friends, to being able to engage with their friends in person without them carrying that worry? Because it's kind of a complex idea that it's just one day it's changed, right? And things can kind of start to go back to normal now. How do we transition them in and set them up for success that way?
I think there's actually kind of two ends of this. Some kids may be very cautious, like you're suggesting, and in that case, it can be helpful to reassure them that when this does start to lift, it's going to be slow and it's going to be careful. And there's health professionals who are responsible for our health across the entire world, the World Health Organization, that look out for our very best intentions and our interests. So they're going to let us return when they think that the outside life is something that is safe enough for us to return. And then kind of going through, how do we plan for that? How do you think you're going to feel about that? Let's kind of talk through it so that we can get our minds sort of exposed to it. For the kids that are a little bit more nervous, it might be helpful to sort of expose them to returning to kind of a back to normal. So if it's them being anxious about reconnecting with friends, can we reconnect with their friends earlier, either through phone chat or FaceTime, any kind of messaging through social media that's supervised by a parent? When they do start to go back to school, does it make sense for them to have a buddy that they can go to school with, or somebody that they have kind of broken that ice with over such a long period of time? Because with anxiety, what's happening is we're social distancing, so the avoidance actually can prolong the duration of the anxiety, but also some of the intensity, right? The longer you avoid it, the harder it can be to return to normal. And I think about some of those kids that already kind of struggled with school refusal for different reasons prior to COVID, that this break from school can actually kind of spin them back into where they kind of once were if they had been making gains beforehand. On the flip side of that, we may have our kids who are less anxious and they're a little bit more excited and willing to kind of go gung-ho. And so really kind of trying to coach them to make sure we're taking things slowly, helping them to be mindful, even though this is lifting and we're returning to normal, that we do have to be cautious of everybody's feelings around it and their own kind of security with it.
Now, I have a child who is very much mama's boy. And COVID for him, he has just loved every second of being with me. My worry comes kind of from the separation anxiety. How do I deal with the separation anxiety from leaving mama's safety and our nest to go kind of back out into the world again?
Yeah, it's a good question. And sometimes that separation anxiety is in parents as well when their own stress can get high. So some things that, so we're talking about separation anxiety. So we're talking about extreme anxiety about separation from either your home base or a caregiver or a loved one, and it interferes with your ability to function. So it could look like clinging behavior. It could look like difficulty at nighttime, going to bed. It could look like refusal to leave home or to go to social gatherings, that sort of thing, or just worrying that something bad is going to happen if they're not with their parents. How you can support, I would suggest talking about it early in small increments so that we can kind of develop a plan for when there has to be times of separation that are necessary. So if that means attending school, what does that time frame look like? How much do they feel like they can sort of withstand at any given time? If they have to go to a babysitter or whatnot, or a doctor's appointment, just kind of practicing with, having predictable times of arrival and departure, and what else we can plan for them to kind of wrap their mind around. Sometimes people find it helpful to use immediate rewards. So when they get to school, they get to go and say hi to their favorite teacher or secretary or something like that. It's just a small example. Wherever you can maintain predictable routines where they can feel that they can trust what's going to happen and they can kind of wrap their head around it, is going to promote their ability to follow through. Putting things in to look forward to, whether that's just quality time with mom when you get home, or a fun task that they can do at the end of it when they're able to successfully make it through a portion of their day. And again, that reiterating that the possibility that something bad could happen is not the same thing as probability. We don't want to promise that bad things won't happen, but we do want to be realistic about the fact that we do have ways of controlling our own situation and when we can seek help from trusted, caring adults.
That's awesome. I love that, because it is something that I've experienced with both of my children. My daughter is a little bit different. I have three. This other question came in. So they were wondering how you would coach them to go about connecting with their children when their children aren't very vocal, I'm not sure the age of this person's little one, but I'm wondering if maybe they're pre-speaking, or maybe they're just one of those kids that just doesn't really share or doesn't verbalize what they're feeling inside. How did they connect with those children?
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite areas to talk about with parents, because there's so many parents that go through this, and there's so many parents who have one child who doesn't stop talking about feelings and situations, and then there's others that they either they shut down completely or they just don't kind of seem like they're connecting with what's going on, which is sometimes the case, but I would say that it's more about them internalizing what they're feeling. So kids express themselves through behavior. We know that, right? And behavior can look like what we call internalized behavior. So they kind of sink into themselves and they withdraw, and they might be worried or shy and that sort of thing. Or it can be externalized behavior. So that would be sort of the example of having a child who acts out. Maybe they're looking for attention, or they're avoiding something, or they need something that the externalized acting out behavior gives them. With kids who are more sensitive, the tricky part is they tend to pick up on more. So it's possible for them to be sensitive and not verbalize it. And typically some of these kids they might have difficulty with transitions. So a lot of these parents know these kids that they need a lot more prep time and lead up time to transition so that they can kind of calmly go into the next phase of it. I would suggest that if a child is of a significant age, I would say 5, 6, 7, 8 and onwards, they do have the ability to provide input. And I think we don't give them enough credit for that. Parents asking them, does this feel good, or does this feel good, or does this feel worse, can be really helpful. I think that when it comes to supporting kids who are nonverbal, you're looking for behaviors that there's a difference between regression behaviors where they may be seeking security and reassurance versus outward behavior that they're seeking more of like attention, or they may be bored. So what I would suggest is modeling calmness, but also just even being there, being available with them, being present with them, and having undivided attention can really go a long way. When stress hits our fan, we've got hormones in our system that react with, cortisol and adrenaline, and being present with somebody really helps to replace that kind of bonding hormone, oxytocin. And there can be a positive impact just by sitting next to your child and them knowing that you're there for them, even if they don't want to talk. And I would suggest, if people are willing and able to do this at times, I would suggest putting down the phone so that the kids know that, they are important and you're paying attention. And if they need you, you're just an arm's length away.
I love that, because it's such a good reminder for us as parents, kind of being stuck safe at home. Thankfully for our case, we were running out of things to do. So a go-to to kind of mentally numb out, I'm guilty of doing it, going on my phone, checking what's going on, connecting with one of my friends, and just like using that time to just kind of block things out. What kind of coping skills can you recommend for parents who are really just experiencing some of the environment that we're kind of talking about, where our children are, regressing in behavior or acting out because they're bored? What can we do to kind of keep it grounded?
One of the first things I would say is give yourself permission to not have everything under control. This is a really hectic time, not just for kids, but also for the adults. As long as you can give yourself some permission to, especially new parents, I think about this all the time, where they think, I've got to have it all together. No one's talking about how difficult it is. And if I feel this way, am I alone? That sort of thing. Self-care, we hear that term all the time. It's the first thing to fall by the wayside. But if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we're not able to take care of our kids, right? So anytime that you can get yourself out for a walk, go for a bubble bath, go for time for reading, that sort of thing, can be really, really important. And just to notice what your body is telling you. If you need a break, maybe you can tag in, tag out. If you have a spouse at home, that can help.
Yeah, those are really great tips. Now, you sent me some resources. Do you want to kind of just talk a little bit about what you've sent for our families to kind of go back after we're done having our call? How to use them? What exactly are you hoping that they gain from these?
Yeah, so what I sent was some resources that are about COVID specifically, and kind of like the do's and don'ts and what to kind of think about. I also sent a resource on grief. And the reason I'm talking about grief is we think of grief and loss as the first thing that comes to mind is somebody who's close to us that dies. But really, there's a lot of different examples of loss. And right now, everybody is experiencing loss with this pandemic. We're at home, we've got a loss of our freedom, our social life, work situation. Kids have a loss of school. Some of our kids, depending on the age, are actually experiencing rejection because they're a little bit confused as to, how come I can't go to school? Are all my friends going to school and I'm the only one? So what I did was I pulled out some sort of age-specific possible behaviors that you might be noticing that are related to loss and grief, and then some quick tips on how to help in simple ways to be there for your kid. And I think really what's important, and you talked about, managing regression and acting out, is, we do teach a lot of parenting skills around reward and consequence and that sort of thing. We're cautioning parents at this time, just because it is a little bit more extenuating circumstances, that making threats of consequence to try and shape behavior may not go as well as expected or go as well as normal and what we've been used to. And so trying to just be there and to recognize and validate the emotions that your kids are having can be really reassuring. It's also okay for parents to talk about their own feelings. So sometimes parents kind of get into this mind of, if I let them know that I'm worried or that I'm grieving or I'm sad, will this have a detrimental effect on them? And I think really what it does is it teaches them that it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to lean on somebody, and that we will get through it, and that I'm not alone with the feelings that I have, and that should I, as the child, want to talk about it, I know that mom or dad or another caregiver can be available to do that.
I love that, because honestly, that's a lot about what Toronto Beyond the Blue stands for, is really just being okay to talk about not being okay, and then having the resources to back up that promise, right? I read an article a few days ago talking about resiliency after COVID. Do you think that it is possible that our kids are going to come out of this a lot more resilient?
It's possible. It's very possible. I think it really depends on the situation. Most of the kids that I have come across that are doing quite well and feeling resilient are really doing well on account of the parents at home and how the parents are handling it, right? So we're always, even if we're inside kind of, not sure about our own stress level, and at times we're worrying and kind of panicking, if we can model calmness, that goes a long way for kids, right? And it's okay for everyone to have the feelings that they have, but it's what we do with them, and it's how we regulate them. I've got some parents who, you asked me about anxiety or worry in the very beginning of this session, and sometimes parents' own anxiety gets in the way of allowing their child to feel. So for example, a parent who has a child come to them and says, I'm really anxious about something, and the parent quickly shuts them down and says, you don't have anxiety, trust me, right? So it's true that they may not have an anxiety disorder, but anxiety and that language that they're using is really important, and feeling anxious is an indicator to us that something is wrong, and it's okay for them to have those feelings. So the flip side of this is it is possible for the kids to come out more resilient, having gone through this and having seen that people work together and pull together as a community, and that, in the end, it does work out. It's also something to be mindful of, especially those households who have overexposure or over information from the media, what kind of impact that can have, because it can have the opposite effect.
And I think that's such a great point. Most police families will probably agree with me. We tend to not watch the news,
Yeah.
but it's not something that we do in our family. But even just listening on the radio, my son Colton mentioned something the other day that was just, it was really funny, because I was tuning the radio out and he was having his breakfast, and I guess they were talking about COVID, and he looks at me, he's like, are we almost done with this garbage already? Like, he's like, I'm just so sick of hearing about it. We get it. And I smiled, right? Because I'm like, well, buddy, we're almost at the end, but they're going to keep talking about it, because it's important that everybody remembers that we still have restrictions that we have to follow to protect everybody's safety. So I think this conversation will alleviate a lot of minds and really just kind of help put back into perspective that, you know, these parents aren't alone. All of our children are experiencing this in some capacity, whether they're showing it in different ways. There's solutions for them. I guess my next question would be, you know, as a clinician, are you accepting new patients into your practice?
Yes. So the practice has changed a little bit. For necessary and safety sessions, I am doing in-person sessions. A lot of my sessions have gone to either phone or video like we're doing now, just depending on what the client is comfortable with. So they can find me online, Julia Rick Wellness Consulting, or my website is jrwellness.org.
Perfect. Yeah. And you know what, for everybody that's going to be watching this, I'll post Julia's information as well so that you can connect with her if you want to continue to like work through some more specific issues and schedule a session. So for right now, I just want to say thank you so much, Julia. You've always been such a huge supporter of our organization and really just championing our children's mental health and advocating for them. So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and helping us, you know, connect with other police families or even frontline workers, first responder families. It's awesome, and I'm very grateful for your friendship and for your contribution to Toronto Beyond the Blue. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's a great cause and it hits home for me too.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Stay safe and have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.